Hi and welcome, my name is Lawrence Baker and this video is going to be about creating silver text using layer styles. It differs from other layer styles in the sense that I had to group the layer with itself and change the blend mode from pass through to normal. So if I put the blend mode back to pass through on the group, you can see it doesn't work as well. It picks up the background layer. It's just not as good. So back to normal. You might ask, well, why didn't I, under blending options, click blend interior effects as group? It happens to be the bevel and emboss is an exterior effect. So it's not an interior effect, it's an exterior effect. So cancel on that. Let's delete that group. Layer panel, trash icon, delete the group only. Come to FX, right click, clear layer style. So I'm back to my mid-grade text, and that is a color of 60% gray. So you need to start with a color that's roughly silver. So I used 60% gray. Cancel on that. Cancel on that. Double click on any part of the layer but the name or the thumbnail. So double click on the normal part of the layer to bring up layer style dialog box. It's also called a layer effect as well, either or. So if you hear layer effect, it also means layer style or vice versa. The meat of this style is the stroke. So I'm on the stroke. I'm going to reset it to default. So I'm on the Photoshop defaults. I'm going to change the stroke size to 35 pixels. I'm going to position it on the center so it's half in, half outside the text. I'm going to change the blend mode to linear dodge add, which is a brightening blend mode. I'm going to tick overprint, which means blend stroke against current layer contents. I'm going to change the color to this is HSB 193 or maybe 192. 3 and 65, which is like a light silvery grey. Don't forget, we are seeing the background through this until we group this layer with itself. So ignore that colour for the time being. So that's the stroke done with. Now we need to put a bevel and emboss on this stroke. Up to bevel and emboss, reset to default. Don't forget, having it ticked means it's active. But to edit this effect or style, you have to click on it here so it's highlighted in light grey. Style, stroke emboss. It will only work on a stroke that's in the layer style dialog box. So if you created the stroke anywhere else, it's not going to work. So it only works in this context. Technique smooth, that's fine. Depth is the strength of the shading. Around 200 to 300 would be absolutely fine. You can look in that box there inside the layer style dialog box to see what's going on. So around there, I think works really well. That's 324%. Direction up, that means where the light's shining from. Up is fine. Size, now if the stroke is on 35, the size of the bevel needs to be roughly in that area. I'm going to go to 45 as a matter of fact, because I find it works better to have the bevel size slightly larger. I'm going to soften by about 5 pixels because all this process makes things a bit jagged, so I'm going to soften it off a little bit. Now angle and altitude. Angle is where the light's shining from. Look at the box there. And altitude, I can change it from here as well, by the way, is the angle of the light from the ground upwards, so to speak. So imagine the spotlight shining at a billboard at 0 degrees angle is shining at the very bottom of the text. At 90 is pointing into the sky. So I'm going to untick use global light. I'm going to click 85 and 26. Use global light means this. If you've got it ticked, it's also available in inner shadow and drop shadow. If you have it ticked in those two and you move the global light here, it will update the other two. Only on the angle, not the altitude. Right, gloss contour. This is going to put a shine on this stroke emboss. So linear means this, the light's going straight across it and nothing is happening. So I'm going to use ring. So it's how the light travels across the surface of the gloss contour. Is going into a dip there and coming out. So it's giving it more of a 3D effect. So okay on that. I'm not going to dwell on contours too much. Screen for highlight mode. Change it to linear dodge add, which is stronger than screen or lighten. Change it to about 75%, roughly around that, 80% for the highlight mode. For the shadow mode, change it to linear burn, which is stronger than multiply or darken, and take that down to about 30-odd%. That would be absolutely fine. So that's the bevel and emboss dealt with. Part of bevel and emboss is contour. So let's come to contour. Let's pick ring again, and this shapes the bevel itself. So ring will be absolutely fine, and keep it on 50%. You can play around if you wish, but around 50 is absolutely fine. Next is a gradient overlay. Click on it, reset to default, so I've got no advantages at all. Blend mode, linear dodge add. Opacity around 40%. Gradient, click on the down arrow. I've got my metals showing. Come to the cog if you haven't. Choose metals. Go OK. Choose silver. Reversing it will make no difference whatsoever because you click here. Reversing that around will make no difference whatsoever. It's just the colour changes 4 times. Darkish grey, very light grey, darkish grey, very light grey, darkish grey. 2 colours changing 4 times. The opacity doesn't change across the range of the gradient. Now change the style to diamond. You'll see that diamond pattern appear there. The scale you can play around with like so. Now if you want to see what's going on with this gradient, blending options, untick transparency shapes layer. You will then see the gradient. Let's move this out the way slightly. There's the diamond pattern, so you can see what's going on. You can even change it here, of course, coming back to gradient, make it larger or smaller. So that's really all that's happening. Blending options, tick transparency shapes layer. So we're back to the normal gradient overlay when we tick on it. So it just helps you visualize things. I think I'm going to take the scale down a little bit. Now, obviously, I don't want to see too many variations inside this text, so I'm sort of playing around a little bit. Line with layer, keep that ticked. I think it really works on this occasion. So do play around with it and see if it's better or worse, ticked or unticked. I think I'm going to stay with 110 on that. Maybe bring it down a little bit, actually. Yeah, so I'm getting more of a variation across the text. So it's important, this scale. I've got it on about 69%. Do play around. The next one is pattern overlay, reset to default. Blend mode of multiply, so it's going to make things darker. Click the down arrow next to the pattern. Click the cog. Choose artist surfaces. Go OK. Pick granite. That'll be absolutely fine. Opacity around 40%. I think I'm going to leave it like that. The scale, I might change it a little bit smaller. I am looking inside, the text itself, seeing if it's really having a massive impact. Around 149 is probably too large. Around 85 is fine. So you're just scaling the pattern up and down, so you're making it larger and smaller in relation to the layer. Right, I'm going to leave it like that for the time being. Drop shadow, I'm going to leave it on 130 actually. It happens to be on that. Roughly, I might bring up the drop shadow to about distance, about 35, 40. No spread because that's the blur. Size, well, again, I might leave it on 50. Don't get too fussed about the drop shadow. You can drag it around here like so. You can see the drop shadow there, little top tip there. But I might leave it, as I said, on about 35, no spread, and as I said, about 45 size like that. If I turn it on and off, you could see it being turned on and off. Not absolutely necessary. Just like pattern overlay, I think it just helps the effect along. Everything else you don't need to play around with, that's fine. As I said, drop shadow and pattern overlay don't have a massive impact, just help things along. So okay on that. Well, we still have to do one thing. We have to group this layer in itself. So group it together. Command and Control G. Change the blend mode to normal. And hey presto, we got our effect. Now, the big things that change this a lot are the size of the stroke and the size of the bevel. So double clicking on bevel and emboss here, I can come to the stroke and maybe shift up arrow to 45 and go to bevel and emboss, the size of the bevel, again, shift up arrow to 55, and it just has quite an impact on the silver effect. So that's it, guys. If you want to download my style, link above and down below to my, link to my website. It will have the file extension .asl. So you need to make sure you've got the styles panel showing, window and styles. Come to the styles panel menu here, click on it, go to load styles, locate your downloaded styles or my downloaded style, .asl, load it in, we'll just go open. That doesn't mean you saved it, so you can always get rid of it with a reset of your styles by going reset styles, or you can also save it. Back to the layers, double click on the name there or the blank area, go to new style. You can save your style yourself, give it a name like silver or something, include the layer effects, which are called layer styles here. So that's what it means by layer effects. Include any layer blending options. So if you played around with fill, opacity, etc., you can include it. If you haven't, it does no harm, and you can save it to your Creative Cloud library. That's it, guys. I think I've covered it in its entirety. It's not the easiest effect to get right. Download it from my website, link above and below. Just remember to group it with itself at the end and change the blend mode to normal and start off with a light grey coloured text. Thank you very much, guys.